Hey everyone, so this is the replacement for my 2018 Honda Accord that I previously sold. This is a 2022 Tesla Model Y long-range electric vehicle. Now I've had this about 6 months already and I've put over 8,000 miles on it, and so I just wanted to share kind of my initial 6-month impressions, what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and kind of maybe some minor things of how it compares to my old Honda Accord. And to be honest, I've put more miles than I even thought I would in the 6 months I've owned this, because I've done more road trips than I expected, just because it's such a great road trip vehicle. So one of the first pros is the instantaneous acceleration, which if you've read about or driven any of the modern electric vehicles, you'll understand this and know it's a big appeal. But just having the ability to hit the throttle and just instantaneously accelerate, there's no delay like a conventional gas vehicle, due to, the gas engine having to rev up and get into the power band. If it's an automatic transmission, it might have to downshift. None of that exists in an electric car. It's just instant direct power, basically whenever you want it. From a standstill, at interstate speeds, it doesn't really matter. And it just makes it really nice to be able to drive like that, because you can pull out onto a busy highway without even thinking about it. You can merge on the interstate without having to think about it. One pedal driving is another big advantage. One pedal driving basically means that instead of hitting the accelerator and then moving your foot to the brake pedal every time you need to come to a stop, you simply let off the accelerator pedal in an electric vehicle like this, and it naturally comes to a stop as the energy goes back into the motors and recharges the battery just a little bit. What that means though for day-to-day driving, especially in the city, is you just leave your foot on the accelerator pedal and you just modulate it. Speed up a little bit, slow down a little bit, speed up, slow down. And it's really nice for stop and go traffic in the city. It's just very relaxing. It's a minor thing, but once you've driven an EV with one pedal, it's again hard to go back to a gas car where you're having to go back and forth. Another thing is being able to start the car and start driving without basically having a key, if you will, or without having to hit a start-stop button. So essentially it's hop in, foot on the brake pedal, shift, you're gone. And it's the same process when you come to a stop. You shift into park, which is just pressing a button, and you get outside and you just walk away, and it automatically locks and shuts down. This is another really nice feature for day-to-day driving. It's again, I've gotten really used to it, to where I've gotten back into some gas vehicles and I've forgotten to lock the car, or I forgot to turn the engine off almost and walked away with the engine running. Just a really nice day-to-day modern convenience of just one less thing you have to think about. Another thing I love are the seats. I've done numerous, like I said, 6-hour plus road trips, and these seats are noticeably more comfortable than my previous Honda Accord, which the Honda Accord had some pretty nice seats to begin with. I believe that they were 12-way power. Adjustable lumbar, heated, ventilated. They were nice, but just due to this being a little bit taller seating position and then the seats themselves being extremely comfortable, when I finish a 6-hour road trip, I don't feel nearly as tired. My back doesn't hurt at all. It's 6 hours feels like 3 probably in my previous car. And I've also had friends and family sit in this car and immediately comment how good the seats are as well. So one thing I really like about the vehicle is the amount of interior storage that it provides. Even though it's a smaller overall footprint and I believe a bit smaller vehicle than my Honda Accord was, it has noticeably more room. Obviously, since it's an electric vehicle, the battery is along the bottom of the chassis, and that leaves the front and the entire rear completely open for cargo. The rear trunk is just massive between the regular trunk surface as well as the sub-trunk, which is almost like a cubby below the trunk. It provides tons of space for road trips. You can really just load up. I've had my road bike in here while I was traveling out of town for almost a month, had tons of bags and cargo, and it just swallowed it all up, no problem. And then the frunk is great for kind of storing things that you want to keep in your car, but you don't want them rolling around all the time. So I've got like a first aid kit, I've got some cleaning supplies, I've got a jack for the spare tire. So the infotainment screen is honestly probably one of the best that I've ever used in a car. All the responses are just lightning fast, everything's fluid, there's software updates monthly, improving little minor features of the infotainment screen. Just some examples, the map is just unbelievably instantaneously fluid to move around. You can switch it to satellite instantly. Just zoom in. It's basically like having an iPad on your car with that fluid, instantaneous response. Going through vehicle settings is instantaneous. It basically takes no time. Even the climate control settings here, there's a lot of little shortcuts. So like turn climate control on, you just tap it one time. If you want to adjust your fan and settings here, you can bring up a bigger screen for climate control, but it's really not bad once you get the hang of it. Having the speedometer in the top left corner here is also not that bad. A lot of people complain about that, but honestly, once you get the hang of having it up here, after a week or two, it becomes pretty second nature, and honestly, I don't miss it at all from not having it in front of the steering wheel here like other cars would have it. And there's a lot of little quick touches that I've learned. Like here's one that if you want to pull up or switch your battery percentage from percentage to miles, you just tap on that number right there and it switches it. If you want to open up your charge session, you can just tap the actual battery icon itself and it opens up your last supercharger session. Tap it again, it goes away. If you have your climate control running and you want to turn it off, instead of opening up this big screen and hitting power, I've learned that you can just tap and hold the temperature, and then it goes dark and the climate control is turned off. So a lot of little shortcuts that once you get the hang of it, this is actually a very easy to use, very intuitive system, honestly. So some of the features I really like on the touchscreen when driving, the Blindspot camera is really nice. I actually saw this on some older Honda Accords that used to just show a Blindspot camera on the right side only. But this Tesla actually shows it on either the left or right side. So whenever you have your left or right corresponding turn signal on, as you can see here, a little image pops up on the infotainment screen and actually shows you traffic to either side. This doesn't replace the mirrors, but it's a really nice just second check that makes sure there's no, cars, motorcycles, cyclists, what have you, in your blind spot. So let's talk about charging. So the supercharger network is probably, in my opinion, the biggest advantage Tesla still has over every other electric car out there. Every other electric car right now, for the time being, essentially relies on a third-party network. The biggest one is Electrify America. Teslas, as you may know, have their own charging network called the supercharger network. And again, because I've done a lot of road trips primarily in this car, I've really gotten to test out the supercharger network, at least here in the kind of Midwest and to East Coast. I checked, I've already done 40 plus charge sessions, like 40 plus times I've pulled into a charger and plugged it in, and every single one has been flawless. There hasn't been any issues with charging or the charger not connecting to the car. Every single time I plug it in and it starts charging within 10 to 15 seconds. And that's just a really nice thing on a road trip, to just not have to worry about, is it going to charge, is the charger going to work. I've done a lot of reading and I keep up on kind of the other electric vehicles, and although it's getting better, it's still, road tripping and non-Tesla just seems like there's the added unknown of, will the charger be fully functional or not. You might arrive at a charger that doesn't work and then now you have to go someplace else. So luckily, yeah, I haven't run into that, so the charging experience has been very nice. The built-in navigation system is also great at showing you where you need to stop and charge on long road trips. In this example here, you can see I plotted a quick trip to Chicago, and the navigation system automatically figures out that I'll need 3 supercharger stops, and it calculates where they are. It even calculates how much battery I will have when I get there, and then once I do plug in, it tells me how long I'll need to stay there before I can leave and have enough charge to get to the next stop. And I've actually found that these time estimates that are built in, they kind of err on the side of caution. If you stay as long as it tells you to at each stop, you'll always be fine and you'll always have enough battery. But in reality, if you're someone like me that's kind of like more into the technology and understands the vehicle a little more, you can actually leave a little bit quicker. So as you can see, editing navigation stops is very easy. It's very easy to add, edit, and remove multiple stops along a road trip. It's basically like using a modern smartphone interface, where it's just very intuitive and very easy to do. And compared to like my built-in navigation on my old Honda Accord, it was horrendous to try to edit stops or edit trips, and this is just so much easier. One more item to be aware of, this is not necessarily a con, but just something to be aware of if you're coming from a gas car, is that the stated range on this vehicle, and this is true for most electric vehicles, it's a little bit more exaggerated on the Teslas. The stated range is not what you're actually going to get on the highway, especially at normal interstate speeds, 70, 75 miles an hour, maybe even higher. Realistically, At 75 miles an hour, I'm probably getting 240, 250 miles if you still leave a little bit of charge for a buffer, kind of a safety buffer. The EPA rating for this is 330 miles, and that's done in a very controlled fashion, usually indoors, following a very specific test procedure on an indoor vehicle dyno. So it's not really representative of especially interstate trips. I think it is possible to get well over 300 miles if you're just driving stop and go in the city at slow speeds where you don't have much wind resistance. But at higher speeds, the drag due to aerodynamics becomes a much higher contributor to the range. So just something to be aware of. You know, I think the range is still plenty for me. I've road tripped it over 1,000 miles, and it's been no issue charging it, but it's just something to be aware of. You're not actually going to get 330 miles on the interstate. So now let's talk about some of the cons that I've noticed while driving. The first one is some minor rattles. It's very minor. They're not like a really, really loud rattle, but some of the door pockets from now and then, they'll just have a slight rattle to them. And it goes away and it comes back now and then. It's nothing major because I am kind of... rattles really annoy me, basically, and so it's nothing too major like that would really bug me and drive me crazy, but it's something I have noticed. Another thing I've noticed is there's a little bit of kind of boominess in the rear cargo area when you go over like large bumps on the road and potholes and things like that. And I think it's partly due to the fact that I'm used to my old Honda Accord that I was a sedan style where you had a separate trunk that was not open to the rest of the cabin. Obviously, this is more of a SUV or hatchback style where the entire cargo area is one big area. So I think that contributes to some of it, as well as this large glass roof probably adds a little bit of echo. So this was something really annoying. The base cup holders in the front of the Tesla have no plastic sort of indents to hold smaller cans. I don't have a water bottle with me, but a metal can or a water bottle will just rattle slightly against this, and it was so annoying. So I had to go on Amazon and buy this little insert. It drops right in. It looks pretty nice, but then the insert adds these little, you know, rubber tabs that keep things from rattling. Kind of ridiculous though to have to buy a cup holder insert on a vehicle of this price point. Another thing that's a little bit annoying is the lack of a spare tire in this vehicle. Now, a lot of new cars these days are being sold without spare tires. I understand that's just because I think the general consumer these days doesn't want to deal with it and they'd rather just call roadside assistance. So why bother, you know, with the car company putting a spare tire in? But me personally, I like having kind of the insurance factor, if you will, of having a spare tire with me. Hopefully I never need it, but if I do, I'm not one to just wait around and try to call roadside assistance. I'd rather just throw the spare on and continue on my trip. So I ended up buying a spare tire from Modern Spare. ModernSpare.com is the company that sells it. And since there's no actual factory place for a spare tire in this car, I ended up having to just throw it in the trunk during road trips. As you can see here, it takes up a fair bit of space, which is a little annoying, but it's not a deal breaker. And again, I'd rather have it with me than not have it. And I think this is something true of a lot of new electric cars, that they just don't come with spare tires anymore. And then let's talk about Autopilot. Autopilot is obviously Tesla's auto steer driver's assistance system. It is not full self-driving. It is not, you cannot fall asleep. You still have to pay attention, but it's a pretty good level 2 system. It stays centered. I primarily use it on the interstate, and on the interstate it stays centered between the lanes pretty much perfectly. One other kind of drawback of basic Autopilot, which is the free version that I have, is when you make a lane change on the interstate, you have to re-engage Autopilot after the lane change because it shuts itself off for you to make the lane change, essentially. Other systems like Honda Sensing that I had in my previous car, Toyota Safety Sense, a lot of the others, they stay on while you make that lane change. So you essentially, like my Honda, my old Accord, you would just make the lane change and then the system would automatically re-engage once you were in the new lane. The Tesla does not do that. It requires me to flick the gear selector twice to re-engage it, which is just a minor annoyance. Now, you can pay more money for what they call enhanced Autopilot. It's, I think at this time, $6,000 extra, which is pretty significant, but enhanced Autopilot does do automatic lane changes to where you can either just tap the turn signal and the car will automatically lane change, or it can even decide on its own, check the blind spots, and just go around slow traffic on the interstate by itself. So that's pretty cool. It is an option, but again, it shouldn't be a $6,000 option in my opinion. Some other items I really like about this car, especially compared to my previous Honda Accord, the phone app actually is one of them, which a lot of people will be like, why do you need a phone app for a car? But it's actually more convenient than you might think. My Honda Accord did have I forget the name of it, but it had an app made by Honda that would allow you to remote start the car. I think you could see what the mileage was, tire pressure, but remote start and remote engine off were kind of the nice things about that app to preheat and pre-cool the cabin. But that app, when you would pull out your phone and try to send a command to the car to remote start, it would literally take sometimes like 3 or 4 minutes for the command to even get to the car and for the car to start up. The Tesla app, in comparison, literally sometimes works within seconds. So it's unbelievable how many features are in the app. You can remote cool and heat the car. You can lower the windows. You can adjust your charge settings. You can just tell the car when to start charging, when to stop charging, see what your current battery level is at, see what your current tire pressure is at. I'll probably go through a walkthrough in more detail here and show you some screenshots, but the phone app is truly amazing and it works flawlessly, like I said. And this car's really exceeded my expectations. The ability to road trip an electric vehicle is currently probably the hardest aspect for someone switching from a gas vehicle, just because the stops do take longer to charge and you have to plan them more. And that's where I was a little bit nervous coming from my Accord, where I could just hop in and drive, you know, however far I wanted, nonstop, just keep refueling. But in that aspect, this car has really impressed me. I've done some extremely long road trips out to the East Coast, different directions, and it's been no problem whatsoever. So it's really been a great overall vehicle. Comfortable seats, amazing infotainment, it's fun to drive, good range, and obviously the charging network that I talked about really makes it a great all-around vehicle that I hope to have for a long time. So thanks for watching, and be sure to check back often.